The deafening crack of a rifle shot echoed through the dusty town of Silver Spring, Colorado, in the spring of 1875, causing Beatrice Zimmerman to duck instinctively behind the water barrel as laughter erupted from the saloon porch. She straightened slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs as she realized the shot had been fired into the air by one of the drunken miners who'd been tormenting her just moments before. "Look at them hands," called out a red-faced man swaying on his feet. "Got hands like a farmhand, that one. What kind of lady has calluses thicker than my boot leather?" Beatrice pulled her worn gloves from her apron pocket and tugged them on, hiding the rough, cracked skin that had become the town's latest source of amusement. At 22, she had worked harder than most men twice her age, and her hands bore the evidence of that labor. The daughter of a failed prospector who died of fever 3 winters past, she now ran their small homestead alone, growing vegetables, raising chickens, and taking in mending to survive. "Ain't no man gonna want to hold them sandpaper mitts," another called out, causing fresh peals of laughter to echo down the street. Beatrice lifted her chin, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her shame. She had come to town for supplies, not to be ridiculed by idle men with nothing better to do than drink their earnings away while their wives struggled at home. "That will be quite enough," came a steady voice from behind her. The crowd on the porch fell silent as Nicholas Graham, owner of the largest cattle operation in the county, stepped into view. At 30, he cut an imposing figure, his shoulders broad beneath a dusty denim jacket, his eyes the color of a summer storm beneath the brim of his Stetson. "Miss Zimmerman has business in town, as do I. Unless you gentlemen wish to explain to the sheriff why you're discharging firearms in the main street, I suggest you return to your drinks." The men grumbled but shuffled back inside the saloon. Nicholas tipped his hat to Beatrice, who nodded stiffly in return. "I don't need your protection, Mr. Graham," she said, continuing toward the general store with determined strides. He fell into step beside her. "Never thought you did, Miss Zimmerman. Been watching you run that homestead since your pa passed. Figure you could outwork half the men in this territory." Beatrice paused, searching his face for the mockery she'd come to expect, but found only sincere admiration. "Well," she said, softening slightly, "thank you for the intervention all the same." "I've been meaning to speak with you," Nicholas said as they reached the wooden boardwalk outside the general store. "I've got a proposition that might interest you." "I'm not selling my land, Mr. Graham," Beatrice replied immediately. "Every cattle baron in the county has asked, and my answer remains the same." Nicholas chuckled, removing his hat and running a hand through his son's streaked brown hair. "Nothing of the sort. My cook quit last week. Headed back east to marry his sweetheart. I've tasted those vegetables you grow, best in the county. Thought you might be interested in providing fresh produce to the ranch. I'd pay fair market price plus a premium for delivery." Beatrice blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected offer. I could consider that arrangement." "Good," he replied, settling his hat back on his head. "Why don't you come out to the ranch tomorrow? We can discuss the details." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat again and strode away, leaving Beatrice staring after him, wondering if this opportunity was as good as it seemed. The next morning, Beatrice hitched her wagon and loaded it with samples of her produce. The journey to the Graham Ranch took nearly 2 hours, giving her plenty of time to worry about the wisdom of her decision. She'd heard stories about Nicholas Graham that he was fair but demanding, that he'd built his ranch from nothing after arriving in Colorado with only the clothes on his back and a talent for working cattle. The ranch came into view as she crested a small rise. Nestled in a green valley, the main house stood proudly among a collection of well-maintained outbuildings. A bunkhouse, barn, and several corrals completed the picture of prosperity, a stark contrast to her modest homestead. As she approached, a young cowboy ran to meet her wagon. "Miss Zimmerman." "Mr. Graham asked me to show you to the house when you arrived." She followed him to a hitching post near the main house, where Nicholas himself emerged onto the porch to greet her. "Miss Zimmerman," he called, descending the steps. "I'm glad you decided to come." "Your offer was intriguing enough to warrant the trip," she replied, accepting his help down from the wagon. The moment her feet touched the ground, she withdrew her hand from his, conscious of its roughness even through her gloves. Nicholas seemed not to notice as he led her inside to a spacious kitchen where a harried-looking young man was attempting to prepare what appeared to be lunch. "This is Timothy, attempting to fill in as cook," Nicholas explained. "He's much better with horses than pots and pans." Timothy looked up with relief. "Miss Zimmerman, please tell me you're here to save us from my cooking." "I've brought some vegetables for Mr. Graham to sample," she said, gesturing to her basket. "Why don't I show you around the ranch first?" Nicholas suggested. "Then we can discuss business over lunch." The tour revealed a well-run operation with 15 cowboys employed full-time and twice that number during roundup. The cattle looked healthy, the buildings solid, and the men respectful. It was clear that Nicholas Graham was not just a successful rancher but a good employer. "Your operation is impressive," Beatrice admitted as they returned to the house. "You've built something remarkable here." Nicholas looked around, pride evident in his expression. "It's taken 8 years of hard work, but yes, I'm proud of what we've accomplished." "We, the men and I," he clarified. "A ranch this size isn't a one-man operation." Over lunch, which was indeed saved by Beatrice's vegetables, they discussed the arrangement. Nicholas would purchase whatever produce she could supply, with a standing order for staples like potatoes, onions, and carrots. The ranch would send a wagon twice a week, sparing her the delivery trips. "This could be quite beneficial," Beatrice said, doing quick calculations in her head. "With a guaranteed buyer, I could expand my garden." "That's what I was hoping," Nicholas replied, "and perhaps you might consider sharing some of your expertise with us. We've tried growing our own vegetables, but the results have been disappointing." Beatrice found herself agreeing to visit weekly to help establish a kitchen garden at the ranch. As she prepared to leave, Nicholas walked her to her wagon. "Thank you for coming today," he said. "I believe this arrangement will benefit us both." As he helped her into the wagon, his hand accidentally brushed against hers, and she instinctively pulled away, tucking her hands beneath her shawl. "You needn't hide your hands from me, Miss Zimmerman," Nicholas said quietly. "Those hands have kept you alive and independent in a land that breaks most men. There's nothing shameful in that." Surprised by his perception, Beatrice merely nodded before taking up the reins and heading home, her mind filled with thoughts of expanded gardens and a certain rancher with understanding eyes. Over the following weeks, Beatrice's visits to the Graham Ranch became a highlight of her routine. Each Wednesday, she would arrive with her wagon full of fresh vegetables and spend the afternoon helping establish the kitchen garden. Nicholas often joined her, his questions about soil preparation and planting techniques revealing a genuine interest in learning. On one such visit in late June, they worked side by side in the newly turned earth, planting seedlings that would provide fall vegetables for the ranch. "You have a natural gift for growing things," Nicholas observed as Beatrice demonstrated how to properly transplant tomato seedlings. "Where did you learn?" "My mother," she replied, her voice softening with memory. "She came from Pennsylvania and brought her gardening knowledge with her. After she died when I was 12, I kept her garden alive. It was my way of keeping her close." Nicholas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I lost my parents young as well, father to a mining accident, mother to consumption the following winter. I was 16, alone in a Pennsylvania coal town with nothing but ambition and a desperate need to see the sky without smoke clouding it." "Is that why you came west?" "Partly," he admitted. "I worked my way across the country for 4 years before arriving in Colorado. Saved every penny until I could buy 50 acres and a dozen head of cattle. The rest grew from there." Their shared understanding of loss and hard work created a comfortable companionship that gradually evolved into friendship. Beatrice found herself looking forward to their conversations as much as the income from her vegetables. One afternoon in early July, a sudden summer thunderstorm caught them in the garden. They ran for the shelter of the barn, laughing as they dodged raindrops that quickly became a downpour. Inside the barn, Beatrice removed her soaked bonnet, attempting to smooth her wet hair. "So much for finishing the bean trellis today." Nicholas handed her a clean horse blanket. "Here, you're shivering." As she reached for it, her glove, heavy with rain, slipped off her right hand. She quickly tried to retrieve it, but Nicholas caught her bare hand in his. "Why do you always hide them?" he asked softly, his thumb brushing over her calluses. "You know why," she replied, not meeting his gaze. "They're ugly, rough, not ladylike. They're strong," he corrected. "Capable. They tell the story of a woman who refused to surrender when life dealt her a difficult hand." Beatrice finally looked up, surprised by the warmth in his eyes. "Most men don't see it that way." "I'm not most men," he said simply, still holding her hand gently in his. "And I've never had much use for so-called ladies who have never done an honest day's work." The intensity of his gaze made her heart flutter. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, but a crash of thunder broke the spell, and he released her hand. "The storm's getting worse," he observed, moving toward the barn door. "You shouldn't attempt the journey home until it passes. Let's get you to the house where it's warm." They dashed through the rain to the main house, where Nicholas instructed his housekeeper, Mrs. Simmons, to find dry clothes for Beatrice. "I'm afraid all I have are some of my sister's things from when she visited last year," Mrs. Simmons apologized, leading Beatrice to a bedroom. "She's a bit taller than you, but they should serve until your clothes dry." Changed into a borrowed dress of soft blue cotton, Beatrice joined Nicholas in the sitting room, where a fire crackled in the hearth despite the summer season. "The storm settled in," he said, gesturing to the window where rain lashed against the glass. "I've sent word to have a room prepared for you. It wouldn't be safe to travel home tonight." "Oh, I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition," he assured her. "Mrs. Simmons will be here, and I would never forgive myself if something happened to you on the road." The evening passed pleasantly with dinner and conversation. Nicholas showed her his small library, delighted to discover they shared a love of reading. As the clock struck 10, Mrs. Simmons appeared to show Beatrice to her room. "Thank you for your hospitality," Beatrice said to Nicholas as she prepared to retire. "It's my pleasure," he replied, his voice warm. "Good night, Beatrice." It was the first time he had used her given name, and she found she liked the sound of it on his lips. The storm continued through the night and into the next day, forcing Beatrice to extend her stay. By the time the skies cleared on Friday morning, she had spent 2 nights under Nicholas's roof, learning more about him with each passing hour. "I feel I've imposed terribly," she said as she prepared to leave, now dressed in her own clothes, dried and pressed by Mrs. Simmons. "Not at all," Nicholas replied, helping her into her wagon. "Your company has been a pleasure." As she took the reins, he hesitated, then asked, "Would you consider attending the Independence Day celebration in town with me next week, as my guest?" Beatrice hesitated, thinking of the townspeople who had mocked her. "I don't usually attend such gatherings. Perhaps it's time to change that," he suggested. "Besides, I'd be honored by your company." Unable to resist the sincerity in his eyes, she nodded. "Very well, Mr. Graham. I accept your invitation." "Nicholas," he corrected with a smile. "I think we've moved beyond formalities, don't you?" "Nicholas," she agreed, feeling a blush warm her cheeks as she drove away. The 4th of July celebration brought the entire county to Silver Spring. Flags decorated the main street, tables groaned under the weight of potluck offerings, and a band played patriotic tunes in the town square. Beatrice wore her best dress, a modest blue calico with white trim, and waited nervously on her front porch for Nicholas to arrive. When his buggy appeared, her breath caught at the sight of him in a clean black suit and crisp white shirt. He helped her into the buggy with a smile that made her forget her anxiety about facing the townspeople. Their entrance into town drew curious glances. Nicholas Graham was one of the county's most eligible bachelors, and his arrival with Beatrice Zimmerman set tongues wagging immediately. "Ignore them," Nicholas murmured as they passed a group of whispering women. "Their opinions don't matter." "Easy for you to say," Beatrice replied, though she appreciated his support. The celebration was in full swing when they reached the town square. Nicholas led her to a table where they enjoyed fried chicken and fresh corn, followed by slices of apple pie contributed by the minister's wife. After eating, they joined the crowd gathering for the speeches. Mayor Thompson delivered a bombastic address about progress and patriotism, followed by Judge Wilson's traditional reading of the Declaration of Independence. As applause faded, the band struck up a lively tune and couples began to form for dancing. "Would you do me the honor?" Nicholas asked, extending his hand to Beatrice. She hesitated, glancing down at her gloved hands. "I don't dance often." "Neither do I," he admitted. "We can be clumsy together." His smile was infectious, and Beatrice found herself joining him on the makeshift dance floor. Nicholas proved to be a better dancer than he'd claimed, guiding her confidently through a waltz. For a few precious minutes, she forgot about the watching eyes and simply enjoyed the feeling of being in his arms. As the music ended, a loud voice broke through the crowd. "Well, look at that. The cattle king and the girl with the workman's hands, what a fine pair they make." Beatrice recognized one of the miners who had mocked her in town. He swayed slightly, clearly having visited the whiskey tent too often. "Careful, Graham," the miner continued, his voice carrying across the now silent square. "Them hands might be too rough for a gentleman like yourself. Might scrape the skin right off you." Nicholas's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, the miner's wife appeared, mortification written across her face. "Albert Miller, you hush your mouth this instant," she hissed, grabbing his arm. "I apologize for my husband, Miss Zimmerman." "The whiskey's talking, not him." "No need to apologize for speaking the truth, Martha," Albert slurred. "Everyone knows it. Girl's got hands like a blacksmith. No amount of fine company's gonna change that." Beatrice felt the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up her neck. She turned to leave, but Nicholas caught her hand, removing her glove before she could protest. He held her bare hand up, his eyes never leaving hers. "These hands," he said, loud enough for all to hear, "have coaxed life from barren soil when most would have surrendered. These hands have rebuilt a roof, mended fences, and created a home from nothing but determination and grit." He turned to face the crowd, still holding her hand. While soft hands were idle, these hands worked. While pampered fingers pointed in judgment, these hands provided. "I admire these hands and the woman who owns them." The square fell silent. Beatrice stared at Nicholas, stunned by his public declaration. Then, to her surprise, Judge Wilson's wife stepped forward and began to clap. Others joined until applause filled the square. Mrs. Miller dragged her husband away, apologizing profusely, while the band quickly started another tune to dispel the tension. "You didn't have to do that," Beatrice said quietly as Nicholas led her away from the crowd. "Yes, I did," he replied. "I've wanted to say something like that since the first time I saw those fools mocking you. You deserve better, Beatrice." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Thank you." They spent the remainder of the celebration together, and when the fireworks lit up the night sky, Nicholas slipped his hand into hers, squeezing gently as they watched the colorful display. The ride back to her homestead was quiet, both lost in thought about the day's events. When they arrived, Nicholas helped her down from the buggy and walked her to her door. "I had a wonderful time," she said, surprising herself with how true the words were, despite the incident with Miller. "As did I," Nicholas replied, his voice soft in the darkness. "Beatrice, I'd like to call on you properly if you're amenable," her heart skipped. "You want to court me?" "Very much so," he confirmed. "I've known from our first real conversation that you're someone special. Today only confirmed what I already knew." In the silver moonlight, Beatrice could see the earnestness in his expression. Gathering her courage, she removed her other glove and placed her bare hand in his. "I would like that," she whispered. Nicholas raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Beatrice. I'll see you soon." True to his word, Nicholas began calling on Beatrice regularly. Sunday afternoons found him at her homestead, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, seeds for rare vegetables, or once, a beautiful pair of gardening gloves made from soft leather. "These won't hide your hands," he explained as she examined them. "They'll protect them while you work, but they're cut to show your fingers." The thoughtfulness of the gift moved her deeply. For the first time, Beatrice felt that someone truly understood and valued her for exactly who she was. As summer progressed into fall, Nicholas helped her harvest the expanded garden, his presence making the work feel like pleasure rather than toil. Their conversations ranged from books to dreams, politics to personal philosophies, each discovery deepening their connection. On a crisp October evening, they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. Nicholas held her hand, his thumb tracing the calluses that she no longer felt compelled to hide from him. "I've been thinking," he said after a comfortable silence. "Your homestead produces more than you need, even with our arrangement. My ranch needs someone who understands growing things, someone who can make it more than just a cattle operation." Beatrice turned to look at him, unsure where he was leading. "I'm not expressing myself well," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "What I'm trying to say is that I love you, Beatrice Zimmerman. I love your strength, your determination, your kind heart, and yes, these capable hands." He kissed her palm gently. "I'm asking if you might consider joining our operations and our lives. Will you marry me?" Beatrice's heart soared. Over the past months, she had fallen deeply in love with this man who saw value where others saw only roughness, who appreciated her strength rather than finding it unfeminine. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Nicholas." His smile was radiant as he pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside lay a ring with a modest diamond flanked by 2 small sapphires. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "The only thing of value I kept when I left Pennsylvania. I've been carrying it, waiting for the right moment." Beatrice admired how the ring looked on her roughened hand, not out of place, as she might once have thought, but a perfect symbol of how beauty and strength could coexist. They were married in November, a small ceremony in the town church attended by Nicholas's ranch hands and the few townspeople Beatrice considered friends. Mrs. Miller made a point of attending without her husband, bringing a handmade quilt as a wedding gift and offering a heartfelt apology for Albert's behavior at the July celebration. "He's sobered up since then," she confided to Beatrice. "Your husband's words that day made quite an impression on many of us, made us think about what real value means." The couple combined their operations, with Beatrice's homestead becoming a productive farm that supplied not only the ranch, but also several businesses in town. Under her guidance, the Graham Ranch diversified, adding orchards and expanding the kitchen garden into a substantial farm that employed 3 workers from town. In the spring of 1876, Nicholas found Beatrice in their garden, planting early peas in the freshly thawed soil. Her hands, bare to feel the earth, moved with practiced efficiency, tucking each seed into its proper place. "You know, those hands built all this," he said, gesturing to the thriving farm around them. "But more importantly, they built my heart." Beatrice smiled up at him. "What do you mean?" Nicholas knelt beside her in the dirt, uncaring of his clean trousers. "When I first watched you working your land alone after your father died, I admired your resilience. But it was when you showed me how to coax life from the soil, when you trusted me enough to stop hiding these hands from me, that I truly began to fall in love." He took her soil-streaked hands in his. "Your hands revealed your character, your strength, your gentleness. They built a path into my heart, stone by stone, until I couldn't imagine life without you." Beatrice leaned forward to kiss him softly. "For someone who once claimed he wasn't good with words, you've become quite poetic, Nicholas Graham," he chuckled, helping her to her feet. Only with you, my love. Only with you. As they walked back toward the house they now shared, Beatrice reflected on how far she had come from that day by the water barrel when she'd been mocked for her rough hands. Those same hands now built a future with a man who valued them, and her for the strength and character they represented. By the spring of 1878, the Graham Ranch had become one of the most prosperous mixed operations in Colorado. Their third anniversary found them celebrating another milestone, the birth of their first child, a daughter they named Margaret, after Beatrice's mother. As Beatrice rocked their infant daughter on the porch of their expanded home, Nicholas joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "How strange life's path can be," she replied. "If you hadn't spoken up that day in town, if you hadn't seen value in hands that others mocked." Nicholas kissed her temple. "I'm thankful every day that I recognized the treasure others were too blind to see. These hands," he said, taking one of hers and kissing the palm that still bore the marks of honest work, "built our life together. And now they're building our daughter's future." Beatrice smiled, looking out over the land they had cultivated together, not just soil and crops, but a life rich with purpose and love. Her hands might never be soft or delicate, but they had built something far more valuable than mere appearances could provide. "I wouldn't change them," she said softly, watching as baby Margaret's tiny fingers curled around her calloused thumb. "Not for anything, nor would I," Nicholas agreed. "Those hands built my heart, and now they're building our legacy. What could be more beautiful than that?" As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant golds and pinks, Beatrice leaned against her husband's shoulder, grateful for the journey that had brought them together, a journey marked by hard work, perseverance, and the recognition that true beauty lies in strength of character rather than outward appearances.